We are talking about customers, investors, regulators, and employees, and perhaps other ones too, depending on the enterprise. But at least those four, that's the level where you should be talking to them. Browser security. What's the role? So I would say that majority of use cases these days go through these black tunnels that we cannot inspect in security much. There's no perimeter anymore. I put it through a proxy and inspect. So whatever comes into the browser hits the workstation as it is, and it's up to the user's brain. It cannot be your first time being a supervisor, or if it is, then you have to learn fast, because you gotta deal with things like HR, hiring, firing, team morale, goal planning, and how do I use the brains of the team that contain much more knowledge than my own brains to come up with the content of the security.
Hello, everyone. Today we have a very special guest for you who's been in cybersecurity trenches for nearly a quarter century. Pasi Koistinen is the Chief Information Security Officer at Coinhako, one of Asia's leading cryptocurrency platforms. But that's just one of his roles in his 24-year journey that's taken him across multiple industries and continents. Pasi isn't just a technical CISO, he is a business leader who understands how security enables growth. He is the author of Smiling Security, a book about success strategies for both businesses and cybersecurity leaders. And today we'll be exploring his insight on everything from enterprise security, business growth, and Web3 world. So it's such a pleasure to have you here, Pasi. So welcome to Be Fearless podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I would love to know, when we were going through your bio, you describe yourself as a business-minded cybersecurity leader. So maybe tell us a little more about your journey. What was the path to becoming one and things like that?
Right, yeah. How to squeeze 25 years into a short time. Well, okay. The business mindset means that you need to understand how companies operate in general. You need to have the sort of understanding that you would probably learn in programs like MBA, Master of Business Administration and such. I know that many of us come in cybersecurity from fairly technical background. So perhaps the background is I like to tinker with IT, I like to tinker with exploits, and I'm curious about hacking and that sort of things. But at the end of the day, companies exist for a reason. They try to make a living and some profit for the owners as well, and some value for the customers, have a role in the society, and many roles for different stakeholders. So I guess where I come from is I've been a service provider side in security. I've been on the buying side as well, buying services. I've set up successful cybersecurity startups, built companies. So I've had different angles on this, and I'd say that just having a technical only perspective as a CISO it's not sufficient, really. You do need to understand broadly the way the business works in order to be able to serve it better.
You just mentioned that it's not necessarily only about being a technical person, but also being business-minded. What do you define as being business-minded? What does it involve?
Right.
And I guess, how do you become one?
Okay. Well, I'd answer this question from maybe the MBA kind of a perspective. First of all, you need to understand the link to how a company works in terms of finances, how it works in terms of its processes and functions, or even cross-functional organizational theory kind of point of view. So you got to have this broad sense of business operations. Imagine being leader of operations in a company. You have multiple functions under you, starting from IT, security, production, development, and whatever, sales even. And you got to handle all of that. So as a security leader, you should be able to kind of at least understand how those functions work and what is important under each of those functions. Like what sort of risks are most relevant over there, let's say in sales or in production. They might be entirely different. So if you want to create value for these functions and protect the business over there, then of course you got to understand it first. Otherwise, there's no way you can protect it. And with the shape of the operation, then you may be able to understand the risks and learn from them, and then set appropriate security controls in place and become a partner with them.
I love the way you put it, because at the end of the day, cybersecurity leaders are helping to, they're looking to help the whole enterprise to stay protected. And to help the whole enterprise, you have to have the understanding of different groups within an enterprise: marketing, sales, anything else, finance. And in a way, understand the behavior of each group. And without understanding the behavior, it's very hard to do the job of protecting them. So I truly understand where it's coming from.
There's also the external point of view. I think many CISOs do rather well just by serving those functions, serving the business internally. But some even more successful ones, they take the broader view of external stakeholders, such as customers and regulators, investors, maybe even employees, which is sort of internal and external. See people come and go, and they join the company, then they leave. So you got to treat that as well. So these basics for stakeholder groups, they basically are the basis of their reputation. What is the esteem and feeling that those stakeholders have about the company? So a company usually exists to serve these needs that these different stakeholders have. So let's say, for example, if we don't serve the customer well enough, they might go elsewhere. That's a disaster. Or if we don't meet the expectation of the regulator, we're in deep trouble, of course, regulatory trouble. Or investors, funding dries up. Oh God, yeah, we've seen that recently in the stock markets. So to sum it all up, a good CISO would form their top-level strategy to serve the stakeholders of the company, and then derive from that all the rest under those functions that are internal to the company. So it's both internal and external.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, as we're speaking about different stakeholders, internal and external, I can imagine that a lot of times there are conflicting interests. How do you, as a CISO, maybe it's more of a technical question, I guess, but how do you map out those priorities when it comes to your organization, right? Which stakeholder do you put first, and then who you put second, without intentionally trying to offend anyone? I can imagine it's quite problematic.
Yeah. Okay, so CISO has to understand the language of risk, and I think it's the main tool that we have to use to take the heat out of the discussion and take favoritism out of my business unit versus your business unit. So, and it's a way that business understands. If you say that, okay, we are setting up security controls over here, but this unit is too sensitive and they don't allow us to put maybe browser controls in place. And they want to use a vanilla browser. We can't interfere. Then you have to report or communicate that risk. Okay, we have sales or some kind of a special unit there that needs some special treatment, and because they don't have those controls in place, we have additional risk. Then you have to kind of model it somehow. Sometimes you can tell it's going to cost us this much money. Quite often you can't. Sometimes you can just say there's a possibility that once or twice a year in this small unit you may have an additional security alerts, maybe even compromises? Can we do something else? Can we box it in somehow to compensate? Can we get funding for that? So you have to have that discussion about the risk and then the additional needed controls. And when you talk about risk, it's not about you. You take that thing, put it on the table, and you're not talking about the person then. It shouldn't be so emotional anymore at that point.
Yeah, I guess you have to be very strategic and disattach yourself when it comes to making these decisions. And it's more about prioritizing risks rather than prioritizing any particular stakeholder, from what I understood, just to make sure that decision that's being made is factual and based on the best interest of a company. Yeah.
True. Yes, it's got to be objective and fairly critical. It has to be beneficial for the business as well. Yeah.
I wonder, you also wrote this book about that's called Smiling Security. I wonder what was the inspiration and the story behind it.
Well, there were many, many reasons why we initially wanted to write that book. I guess one of the reasons was that we saw so many examples based on our experience where companies set on the journey to improve their cybersecurity, but at the end of the day, they achieved very, very little. And it wasn't so much a technical failure as it was a leadership failure. So clearly there were two sides to the coin. First side was that companies didn't know really what to expect or demand, or what is a security function? What is a CISO? What is that role? What are they supposed to do and provide for the business? And then they hired up a person who wasn't a good fit because they didn't know what to hire.
Yeah.
And then the other side of the coin is, of course, when you end up there, how do you achieve the goals? How do you do the job?
So within the book, do you help to map out what kind of CISO an organization requires? Because I can imagine each company is very unique, and each company requires different head of security to help them out. So what kind of advice would you give in this case?
Yeah, that's true. All the businesses are kind of one-offs in a sense that they are unique, peculiar. You got to learn it first. But the steps when you go into a company as a new CISO, how do you set about doing a security program, the initiatives, monitoring everything, finding out what you have, then building up support from the management, setting up policies, all those things that the job requires. It's kind of general, you know. I don't see that from small company all the way to the largest company back in Finland. There was not much difference in the process, how you do that thing, how you improve the security. So in a sense, the job's the same, but companies are different.
So you you go through the same steps, but I would assume that it also goes back to the risks that each enterprise has to deal with, and then based on that, you have to tailor what kind of solution you go for. And I wonder, how do you approach the challenge of communicating security risks to board members who don't have technical backgrounds? Because this is not an easy task to do. And if you're a technical CISO, I guess you have to have a bit of both, be able to translate what you do.
Yeah. A board is, depending on the size of the company, it's quite far from the operations. And security often is an operational matter for CISOs. So you got to step into the shoes of those board members. In a smaller company, you might actually see them sometimes. But in a larger enterprise, you really have to fight for the time to see this board, and you may not have a lot of time with them. But yeah, that's why you have to be able to step into their shoes and think that as a board member who's representing the interest of the shareholders, what is relevant to them. I would say that if you don't set up your security strategy from day one to serve those four stakeholder groups that I mentioned,
Yeah.
it's not going to be high level enough to address their concerns, because we are talking about, again, customers, investors, regulators, and employees, and perhaps other ones too, depending on the enterprise. But at least those four, that's the level where you should be talking to them. And they may have some, very detailed questions about even operational deep level stuff. Some I've seen many times over that you try to talk to them about high level security concerns in an enterprise, and then they come back with a question about, like, okay, how about this latest exploit against Internet Explorer, and then what is it these days, different Edge browser. So you kind of have to know your stuff when you go there.
Yeah, definitely. I think you never can underestimate what people do know about this space.
Yeah.
And I think, especially at this particular moment of time, a lot of companies emphasize the cybersecurity posture as one of the most important metrics out there, just regarding how many cybersecurity risks are out there. Just even talking about the latest Bybit hack, right? I think a lot of people put higher priority when it comes to cybersecurity. What kind of lessons do you think security leaders should take from these sort of incidents?
Well, they are very, very interesting if they are industry specific. So I work in crypto, and the landscape in crypto is very much centered around security. You can't be in the business for a long time if you don't have a good level of security. So it's kind of like the basic lifeblood that you have to handle somehow. And as such, we tend to be sensitive to any big news about security, and especially if it's in crypto. So it goes straight up to the management team level. People start automatically discussing it over there. And if you happen to meet those board members, be sure to have answers to them, because these guys are very experienced, very smart, well educated. They can ask detailed questions. So that's very important too. So you may be surprised that they actually know more than you do about some issues around the incidents, and they may have friends over there in the company, maybe Bybit or somewhere else, and they get inside information through friends, like, okay, check out this risk, learnings that they can teach you. So got to be also humble. As a CISO, you're an expert, but not all knowing.
Yeah, definitely. And we actually, I think, was it last week, we just spoke to the CISO of Trust Wallet, also in crypto space. And I think one of the things that she emphasized is the crypto industry is actually has very strong ties when it comes to security, right? When it comes to traditional financial service industry, in a way, you're always relying on a big brother to come in and help you solve stuff. But in the crypto world, you kind of have to rely on a community of being able to mitigate those risks that are out there. Do you see sort of contribution of overall this crypto community to help you out in direction of Coinhako in general?
Well, yeah, let's get back to that Bybit thing in a bit, but it's an interesting case. But
Yeah.
it is true. It is true. Crypto community is active, it's true. But what it means is that there's no regulatory framework or established old-time business friends and associations and industry guidelines that would help you out when something happens. So you're kind of like left to your own connections.
Hmm.
And if you say that it's community that helps me, it means that, okay, they'll just look for your best friends and help yourself,
Yeah.
which is not very mature.
Yeah.
So I'm not entirely happy at the level where we are at now. I think we should have high level of maturity in collaboration between crypto exchanges, for example.
Mhm.
And it varies a lot. If you look at the different kinds of projects, let's say a DeFi project,
Mhm.
I just don't want to mention any single one, but compared with the largest exchanges, of course, they have different levels of maturity.
Hmm. Hmm.
Having said those tiny crypto projects probably don't have a single security person ever worked with that project. So the resourcing is entirely on a different level, and let's admit it, a lot of it is still unregulated. Maybe that's the reason why it's still growing.
Hmm.
Maybe it will mature in time, so don't lose faith. But I would
Mhm.
also say that it's wise to have a look at the partners that you partner with.
Mhm.
If you have $1,000,000, who do you want to trust with it? That's a
Yeah,
good question to ask.
that is a very good question. And just to sort of going deeper into what kind of um, specific cybersecurity problems that might touch crypto and Web3 space, I'm
Mm.
thinking about Web3 wallets because they typically come in the form of browser extensions. And right now, we see so many malicious extensions out there. Is
Yeah,
there is there a way for Web3 users to manage their funds and interact with centralized apps, considering how dangerous it became out there?
right. So if you're looking at the specific question about the browser extensions, for example,
Hmm.
it's not so much different from having a wallet software running on your computer. Let's
Hmm.
admit it, it's just software running on the local workstation that you happen to use. Um, and let's say you also play games, you download torrents, you play music, you watch whatever content you watch, questionable content too, in the internet. You click links, you open up emails,
Hmm.
do your LinkedIn, WhatsApp, Telegram. If it's all on the same computer, it's just code, and it's up to your own behavior if you will be exploited or not.
Hmm.
And sometimes we think that it's smart wallet, it's smart contracts. I'm very smart, but
Hmm.
let's admit it. If the attacker is smarter than you and the contract is smarter than you, and you don't really understand what's going on when you click something and accept and install,
Hmm.
there's a chance that the crypto assets are at risk and they're gone one day. So we got to kind of understand that it's really a awareness of ourself, that human being and the computer together, that form the risk. So back to your question about, is it good enough to have the browser extension wallet? Maybe
Hmm.
for $1,000 if you can afford it, it's good enough. Or some guy who has got a lot of money, 10,000. Or if you're
Hmm.
really rich, maybe even 100,000. But what's your
Hmm.
appetite? I mean, how much are you ready to lose if somebody hacks your computer?
Hmm.
So uh, if you handle more money than you're ready to lose, if you're risking it by putting it on an unsecure computer, let's call it that,
Yeah.
computer at risk,
Yeah.
then perhaps you can invest a little bit on a separate device that you actually secure and only use for that purpose. That would have actually protect you from a lot of risks. Like
Hmm.
if you never open an email on that other device, how do you send phishing links? If you never use WhatsApp, how do you get that phishing link there? If the only function of that device is to use the crypto, then I would say 99% of the risk goes away. But a typical user never does that.
Hmm.
Uh, if you want to raise the bar even a bit more, maybe a hardware wallet. There's
Hmm.
many different kinds. Like I don't want to mention any specific brands, but guys who are
Hmm.
in crypto, they would know that hardware wallet is basically offline.
Hmm.
But then we come back to the Bybit in a bit. I know
Yeah,
whereby
definitely.
you have to use that wallet with some software.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I guess attacks like this really makes you rethink your whole security posture and the way things are meant to be conducted. And I think in general in the cryptocurrency space, phishing attacks are so damaging when it comes to transactions, when I think, because in a way, the whole process is irreversible. I wonder, as a CISO yourself, what kind of strategies do you have in mind when you think of the best way to protect against this kind of attacks?
Okay, so there's kind of two perspectives to this. There's the user perspective where I am a crypto investor. I just put my assets, my money into crypto.
Yeah.
Then there's the other perspective where I'm maybe a centralized exchange that is taking care and safeguarding some large amount of user assets. And I think the answer is pretty similar. So I think the main safeguard is that you only put on your online device as much as you're ready to lose, or how much ever is regulated. So if you're a single user who's investing into crypto, it means that you would have some sort of a hardware wallet or other cold wallet, which means, okay, it's never touching the internet, where you maybe take 90% of everything you have. So the keys never leave that device. That's the number one thing. So don't put it on your browsing computer that you use for everything else. Similar to that, the idea is the same with centralized exchanges. So let's say you run that business, you should have a really robust infrastructure in place. But because you're handling so much more value for many, many, many customers, it's got to be more than just the hardware wallet. Just trusting on that device would be, user level security. You got to put a little bit more in place. Checks and balances. No one single person can move money and that sort of things. So more value to protect means more things that you have to pass through in security, more checks and balances, more controls.
What is your view then when it comes to browser security? I know, like, in ideal scenario, you'd love to have multiple devices to handle different tasks, but unfortunately, finances are not unlimited, and you still have to think, how do I optimize the financial side of things and at the same time try to be as secure as possible? So what are your thoughts when it comes to browser security?
Well, I think, first of all, we've seen a massive shift in the last 10 years in how we use different services and programs. So software as a service is the way that it seems that we all do things. It's more and more common that we just fire up the browser, go to a site, and then we start using it for business. No matter how valuable the data is, we just put it on the cloud to some sort of a SaaS service. And it means that we're becoming somewhat agnostic of the operating system itself, because all of the browsers do pretty much the same thing. And there's other changes as well. One of them is that almost everything is going through a SSL or TLS tunnel, encrypted tunnel from your computer all the way to the whatever cloud service you're using for business. And in security, well, the security of that tunnel is excellent. So good, in fact, that security teams have really hard time looking into what's going through that tunnel. And when you can't see it, because it's so well protected from this computer all the way to the cloud service, and there's no way you can intercept and inspect if it's secure or not, then it's a black box. You just allow everything going back and forth with no checks and balances. And it's up to the user's awareness whether he's going to the right site, if it's a malicious site, or the right one, and what kind of content is being downloaded or delivered to the client computer through that tunnel. And it's all through the browser without us even thinking about it. Let's admit it. We are really bad at checking that log over there in the browser, or checking that link. Does it really go to the address that we think it goes to? And there's a million other little tricks that the attackers are playing on us as a user. They try to make it so authentic that we'd be fooled. And so we like to take shortcuts because we have to get the job done. We don't have time to think about, is this a risk at every little turn? If we did that all day long, we couldn't even cross a road because we'd be so concerned about, moving our legs.
That is very true. That is very true.
That's the human nature. So, okay, browser security. What's the role? So I would say that majority of use cases these days go through these black tunnels that we cannot inspect in security much. There's no perimeter anymore. And put it through a proxy and inspect. So whatever comes into the browser hits the workstation as it is, and it's up to the user's brain. Is this good or not? Security risk or not? So do we need awareness? Yes. Do we need some tools at the endpoint to protect it? Yes. Do we need more tools? Probably yes. Should it be hardened when you're dealing with a business with a lot of value? Probably yes. So it's like layers of cake that you have to put in place, and more of them are now on the endpoint than before.
Definitely. And I think
one positive thing though, with the SaaS services, we don't have to install so much local software on the computer, so a bit less complexity there.
Yeah. I think when I can just imagine that each year it becomes a little more complicated. You always have to be in this constant competition who is faster, an attacker or you, when it comes to protecting your enterprise. But in a way, I just would love to bring back the point that you were bringing earlier around making sure and understanding every stakeholder when it comes to your company. And as you mentioned, browser is in a way like a black box that other solutions don't really have visibility to. And I can imagine if you're security aware user, like any security team within a company, of course you have this leverage of potentially double checking everything, but still it's so it's so intense if you have to do it for everything. But someone who is not in this space, it is way harder to not become a victim of attacks that orchestrated via browsers. And our research team actually documented how, for example, attackers are impersonating wallet services such as MetaMask and distributing malicious QR codes. Do you see any other those out of the ban and emerging attacks like this that you think are quite prevalent in the space?
Yeah, we do quite a bit actually. So if we look 25 years back in the year 2000, we had phishing messages coming over. Well, we do have phishing these days too, and pretty good phishing as well. So it's still there, but out of ban means that you get the same malicious content by some other message, maybe WhatsApp desktop or Telegram desktop or browser WhatsApp, the extension, or via a web download, and it's all coming through an encrypted application or tunnel, hitting your workstation there. So it's called out of band because it's not going through any traditional email security filter that would remove it. And as such, you can have very malicious content on your workstation, let's say a PDF file with some exploits in it. A simple example, just to make it practical. In crypto, we see quite a lot of these fake job ads where people are targeted in LinkedIn and in other job portals. And they're approached by somebody who's saying that, hey, we got this tremendous job opportunity for you. Why don't you have a look at this file? This is the job description.
Yeah.
And then they send it over WhatsApp or Telegram or even web download. And all of those go through all of the filters at the so-called network edge without any checks and balances. And the first time you can even have any visibility to it is when it lands to the workstation and a user runs it. So I think if you want to have defense in depth, this is a very bad thing because you don't have any checks before it's already here, affecting possibly your workstation. So it's then up to your antivirus or EDR product to catch it if it can.
Yeah. I love actually the example that you brought up, because even if we judge the user behavior at that time that they clicked on the job posting, you would never want someone within your company to know that you did it, because you're potentially considering a different job. So it becomes way more complicated for security teams to investigate such incident, because you as a person don't necessarily want to disclose that.
Yeah, people typically don't want to tell if they have second thoughts about their jobs. That's for sure. And there are privacy things that you have to consider as well. You might hear conversations, oh, LinkedIn is so dangerous now because those PDFs are being disseminated and you know, all those fake job ads, and people are targeted that way. And should we ban LinkedIn? Well, how about the impact on employees? Like, aren't they supposed to have an opportunity elsewhere? You gotta, you know, address the question at least that we're not trying to limit your opportunities in life. It's not the HR thing.
That is very true. And I know that there is this saying that, you know, when it comes to Web3 space, typically people think that they're more tech savvy than average person. Do you think does it still make them more susceptible to attacks and social engineering, or not really?
I honestly don't have any proof, objective proof about the behavior, but it's a good question. I have my own opinions and my own ideas, and I think that in general, people who are tech savvy, they take new tech into use first. They're the first adopters. Just like me, you gotta have the latest phone and try it out or something like that. Or if I can have my hands on something very cool, then I love to try it. But does it make me more security aware? Does it make me not react the same way to a very lucrative job offer? No, I don't think there's any correlation. I don't think those things touch each other. I have to train myself specifically to avoid social engineering attacks, which are actually there are ways to influence the brain of the other side of the screen. It's for the human being. It's like we have these shortcuts in our mind that make us want to act in a certain way automatically without thinking about it. Because if we stop and think for a minute or even 10 seconds, we don't usually make a lot of mistakes, but we just don't want to do it all the time because we have a job to do, a life to live. So social engineering works because it's the human nature. There are some, let's put it this way, there are rules to influence people, which attackers know how to exploit. Such as authority and, you know, sense of urgency and maybe reciprocity. I want to please you because you made me did a favor to me. So all kinds of these tricks, and they're non-technological. So I think pretty much anybody, even those who are most tech savvy, are susceptible to these things. And we fail often to this Dunning-Kruger effect, where we think we're smarter than we are.
That is very true. And just in your experience as a CISO, do you have any like most memorable incident that comes to mind that you thought, that was a fun time?
Oh, well, we are going to talk about the Bybit, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. That's a very good example, actually, because it's very recent. It's the largest
Mm,
hack of all times by a very, very wide margin,
mm,
1.5 billion almost.
mm,
Um, so I think that's the best example at the moment. It's very current. So it's an excellent example of technological uh, supply chain kind of attack.
mm.
We've been talking about those recently for a few years. Um, and it's not an easy one to avoid unless you design your system so that you can pretty much reduce the risk to close to zero. So that's a tough one. Supply chain is not an easy one to control. There are other cases as well. I've seen, let's take one little example. I've seen an airline, for example, taking their web shop, that thing that they put on the web pages and then they sell the tickets.
Yeah.
I've seen it taken offline for tens of days because of a hack. So
Mm,
they lost tens of millions of dollars because of that in sales.
mm,
So you can start to think like, would it be better to invest that tens of millions of dollars in security so that this never happens again? Probably makes business sense. Um,
yeah.
so just to give you an idea,
Mm,
well, let's face it, airlines are web shops with airplanes.
yeah. Yeah. Definitely. And you're right, because when it comes to this level of risks, right? Um, I understand that as a security leader, you have to manage all the stakeholders, including your finance department, that tells you, hey, be careful where you put your money in. But then one such incident just proves that maybe we should have gotten this tool that would have stopped the examples that we see out there in the wild. So
Mm,
yeah, I think those are some of the great examples that you brought up. Um, and I know, since you've been working in this space, there must be a lot of security professionals looking to enter the space. And I'm sure some of our listeners would love to enter this space. What are some
mm.
qualities you look into in people when hiring?
Depends on the position, of course. I would like to hire a person when I know what I need as an employer. Like, what is
Hmm,
the job exactly about? When I know that well, then I can maybe hire somebody. But yeah, if you look at the top positions, the security managers and CISOs and leaders,
hmm,
a certain level of maturity and experience is a must because we are in the industry where I like to call them best opponents. We have the best opponents of all industries.
hmm,
It's not so different from traditional banking, but the
hmm,
difference is that the type of business that we run is usually fully online.
hmm,
It's based on cloud. Blockchain is kind of specific technologically, and that sets some qualities that many people don't have. And I've seen also CISOs who would never do the job just because they feel uncomfortable with it. They would not feel that
hmm,
maybe there's too many risks to control. They don't have a good grasp of how blockchain exactly works.
hmm,
Maybe they don't understand how encryption works, how signing works,
hmm,
that sort of things. So there's many things that have to come together to make the right kind of profile to work in the industry, or you have to learn it at the job very quickly. And I would say that these technological special skills that you gotta have at least a good grasp of them. Pretty much everybody in security should have those.
hmm.
If you don't understand how blockchain works, uh, or how the company makes profit based on blockchain business, then maybe you cannot protect that blockchain and the assets on it.
That makes sense. And if you were, let's say, if you were mentoring a new CISO today, what advice would you give to them?
Okay, let's think that imagine that we are facing with a person who is quite new to the position.
Yeah.
I feel that in this position, it's very important to be able to speak the language of the business. That means we get back to the discussion about the risks, how to communicate those to higher ups or our colleagues or maybe heads of departments and such. So it's not the technical language that we have to use. But when we talk to our own teams, we're also supervisors, we're bosses of people quite often, or at least we have a few people in the team. Depends on the size of the company, but it might be huge too. Some companies have up to 1,000 in security. So that calls for leadership skills. So it cannot be your first time being a supervisor, or if it is, then you have to learn fast because you got to deal with things like, okay, HR, wow, hiring, firing, team morale, goal planning, and how do I use the brains of the team that contain much more knowledge than my own brains to come up with the content of security? What should the security team do? And how do I get all of that information distilled up so that I can have some reasonable goals for the next year? All kinds of these things, skills of organizing things, skills of handling people and human matters, emotions, human emotions. We all have them. So if you come from purely technical standpoint and you love to hack stuff, it doesn't prepare you very well for that. I can tell you. So maybe a technical CISO coming from a hacker background or very technical position would not even enjoy it.
Very interesting. I think I guess that was my personal surprise when I was speaking with more CISOs. A lot of people emphasized this leadership skill. I would have thought that, of course, technical skill is super important, but I just didn't realize before how much emphasis goes into leadership, because at the end you have to manage all of the stakeholders, and you said hiring, firing, and all sorts of things. So those are some great points. And something, we have this little tradition in every podcast. So our previous guest typically asks question for our next guest. So our previous guest had this question for you. If you could instantly fix one major cybersecurity issue across the whole industry, what would that be and why?
Right. So I suppose across the whole industry means the crypto industry then, because that's my field now. I would take out the influence of North Koreans because they are by far the largest single threat to a lot of, especially DeFi, Web3 kinds of projects and any asset in that space, but also centralized exchanges. We see them attacking constantly both sides. So if that would be fixed, we would have that much easier job to do. And it's not an easy one to solve because we just have to passively defend against them. It's a whole nation, militarized against a certain industry. So there's no easy fix for that. We cannot send a police force over and just arrest them. I know there are international warrants for these guys in North Korea, but who's going to be able to enforce it over there?
That is very true. That is a great example. Yeah, I really liked it. And what question would you like to ask our next guest?
Oh, wow. That's difficult, without knowing this industry where they operate. Right.
Yeah, it has to. It probably has to be a little more general.
Yeah. Okay, this is more of a personal one, and I'm sure many CISOs think about it. So, looking at your personal growth, you're a CISO already, sort of, at top of the security's food chain. Unless you want to switch jobs, how do you grow? How do you learn more in the job, and kind of continuing the question, what is it that you aim to learn next? What's the next big thing that you need to learn? It might be
Very
outside of security too.
Yeah, very philosophical. I like this question, and I'm sure that a lot of CISOs, when they go to sleep, that's one of the things that they keep on wondering, right? Yeah, I absolutely love this question. Well, it was such a pleasure to have you on our podcast, Pasi. It's been a lot of fun, and I think we learned a lot of ways how you approach cybersecurity within Web3 space. I at least can see that there are a lot of differences versus other industries. So I'm sure for our listeners, whether they're looking to enter the space or looking for different ways to approach the problems, they're going to find it super interesting.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks.